Okay, so now we're going to start putting our labor and benefits cost calculations together to determine our department labor cost. So what is recommended is you build a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet's going to contain the name, the title, the position, whether the person is hourly, what their rate is, what their benefit percentage is, how many hours they worked, and we're going to enter in formulas in the spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet will actually calculate our cost for us, and we can have it set up to do our budgeted or our actual, right? Our standard or our actual. We have all the formulas built in, the names, the rates are all there. All we have to do is punch in the hours, right? And it'll allow for us to easily calculate very quickly what our labor cost is per week, right? For a department or company labor cost, add the labor cost for all the employees, right? So I touched on this a little bit before, but standard labor cost can be forecast for days, weeks, months, or years, right? This is what we're budgeting. This is what we're planning, right? And obviously, the longer the time period forecast, the less accurate it's going to be. I mean, we have trouble in our business knowing what's going to happen next week, let alone 6 months from now, right? Actual labor cost is always going to be the actual hours that we paid out for history, right? So what did we already do? We always want to compare these side by side to see if we are planning our weeks properly and we're close. There's very little variance between standard labor cost and actual labor cost. They're always going to be a little bit different, but they should be close, right? If we're doing our proper job forecasting and we have a good idea of who's coming in, then our standard labor cost should be very similar to our actual labor cost, right? Okay, so I just mentioned actual and standard are rarely identical, but they should be in the same ballpark, right? Salaried workers earn the same amount, but hourly workers may have their schedules adjusted, right? We can't do much about a salaried employee that's getting paid X number of dollars per year, just divided up by the days and then in the year. But hourly people, those are the ones that are going to fluctuate based on the day-to-day business, right? Generally, it's going to start with your part-time employees. If it's slow, they're going to get knocked back a bit. Or if it's busier, they're going to get bumped up a bit, right? Generally, your full-time hourly employees don't see a lot of that fluctuation unless the forecast fluctuates drastically, i.e. a pandemic, then everybody's affected, right? Even salaried people. So big variances between standard and actual labor cost may be a sign of poor management. Maybe we're not forecasting right. Maybe we're not scheduling right. These are all things that we need to consider, right? If there's a big variance, it should be a red flag that, hey, it's time to investigate and figure out why, right? So labor cost as a percentage. We take our actual and standard labor costs in dollars, may vary greatly as a business volumes, but the percentages should be very similar, right? If we say our labor cost is 25%, and we're doing $1 million, obviously 25% of the $1 million is going to be more if our business is only $100,000. But that percentage should still stay the same as a ratio to the business volume. So labor cost percentage compared to total sales. Food cost, beverage cost, they compare to their respective costs. Like food cost percentage, we're always going to calculate on food sales. Beverage costs, we're always going to calculate on beverage sales. But labor cost is going to be calculated on total sales. So everything we sell in our business, food, beverage, room rentals, t-shirts and hats, I don't care, right? We're going to calculate our labor cost based on all the revenue that we've got coming in, because it's very, very difficult to say, okay, well, this person over here, that labor went to food cost, but it didn't go to the beverage cost, right? So we generally look at labor cost as a whole compared to our total sales. So labor cost percentage calculation is very similar to our food cost. It's a triangle. We're going to take our labor cost dollar divided by our total sales to get a labor cost percentage. Labor cost sales must be cover the same period. So when we're comparing our budgeted or our standard labor cost to our actual labor cost, we need to make sure that we're comparing the same time period. We're comparing the month of June to the month of June, right? We're not comparing, the month of May to the month of June, right? The budget from May to the actual in June, that doesn't make sense. You want to compare apples to apples or oranges to oranges, right? Standard labor cost percentage uses our standard labor cost and our standard budgeted sales dollars, right? Our actual is going to use our actual labor costs and our actual sales dollars. So in the first example I've got here, we want to calculate our weekly standard labor cost percentage if the weekly labor cost is $14,200 and our forecasted sales for the week are $48,500. Notice here we're comparing our budgeted labor cost against our budgeted sales or our forecast, right? So it's get a pen out here, $14,200 out of our total sales of $48,500, which is going to give us 0.293 or 29.3%, right? Pretty straightforward calculation. Same thing that we've done in our food cost in the past, except now this 48,500 is total sales, not just food sales. Next example. Restaurant budgets $12,100 in a weekly labor cost and $38,000 in weekly sales. Actual figures for that week are $12,850 in labor and $39,400 in sales. We want to compare both standard and actual weekly labor costs to see how they did. What was our plan and what did we actually do? Right? Did we do well or did we do poorly? So what I like to do is set up sort of two sides here. So we're going to do our standard and our actual. So our labor cost standard, so our budget, we budgeted $12,100 and we set our sales, we're going to be $38,000. Our actual labor cost was $12,850 and our actual sales were $39,400. Okay, so what's our percentage for each of these? Well, first off, we have 12,100 divided by 38,000 is going to give us 31.8%, right? And our actual, we had $12,850 out of 39,400, which gave us a percentage of 32.6% labor cost. So, my question, did they do well? Did they manage their labor effectively? It's not much of a difference here. So the difference between 32.6 minus 31.8 is a, whoops, did I do that right? 32.6 minus 32.8 is only, my calculator's not working, or my big fat fingers. 32.6 minus 31.8 gives me a difference of 0.8%. That's the difference between these two. So we actually spent 0.8% more in labor cost. It's less than a percentage. That's not bad, right? Well, let's have a little deeper look this here. So our labor cost went up by how much? Let's call this our variance, VAR. So our labor cost went up by $750, right? We spent $750 more than we had budgeted. But how much revenue did it go up? Well, our revenue went up $1,400. So what's that percentage? That's almost 50%, right? 53.6%. So, although looking at this number here, 0.8% increase is not a huge bump from what we had budgeted. But if we look at it for the actual increase in dollars, we increased our revenue by only $1,400, but over half of that went to labor. So they did not manage their labor effectively. They spent way too much labor based on the sales that were coming, right? So although this number is small, we have to look at it, what does it actually mean? That's a big jump at 53.6%, right? So yeah, poor performance by management. So how labor costs relates to profit, right? Fixed costs do not change with business volume. So higher sales beyond budget should generate greater profits if management controls the variable costs. If we go back to that last example, we had an extra $1,400 in revenue based on our labor percentage of 0.318. We should have only spent an extra $445 on labor, but we spent $750, right? And remember, when it's talking about fixed costs here, labor is not a fixed cost. Labor is variable because we have a fixed cost component of salary plus our hourly. When you put those two together, that value fluctuates, right? So our profit, not our labor cost, is ultimate measure of management performance, right? So reduced labor cost only helps profit if other costs are not equally increased, right? So we need to make sure that we're managing all of our expenses as a whole, but we need to make sure that, yes, as we get busier, we're going to need more people, right? If our business goes up $1,400, the expectation is we need to add some labor, whether it's servers or cooks or whatever, right? But we have to be careful that we don't add too much, right? We need to make sure we stay within those budgeted parameters so that we don't, lose our potential profit. Okay. All right. So the next video, we're going to start talking about performance management.